All right, so the question is, can Bitcoin crash in 2025? Well, I'll do the obligatory thing. I don't think this makes any difference because it's kind of obvious, but this is not financial advice, right? Everybody says this, and it's always true. And to get real qualified financial advice, you have to go to someone who's authorized by your country's regulators, etc. But that's obviously, quite obviously, this channel is not financial advice. It's just simply what I think. Can Bitcoin crash in 2025? Well, in my opinion, look, it's pretty clear. At least we've got 3 or 4 pretty solid data points that Bitcoin goes through a 4-year cycle that is correlated with something called the halvening. The halvening is where the difficulty of computing new blocks increases every 4 years, and that therefore reduces the amount that can be of new money supply that can be created by miners. So it happens every 4 years, and the way I read it, now look, there's a lot of different models out there that you might have seen. There's a stock to flow model, Plan B model. I think they might be the same or similar. No, I can't remember, but they all look the same, right? They all show that every 4 years there's a bull run, and then a crash, and then another bull run, and then another crash, etc. And I don't think this cycle is any exception. I think it will crash again. And when is that crash coming? It's probably, if you look at the chart, it looks like it's going to be this year, 2025. Possibly it might be next year, 2026. Nobody knows for sure. Difficult to say when it's going to crash. But I do believe it's going to crash. And when it crashes, it typically loses like up to 75% of its value, right? That's just the way it is. I do think it's going to crash this year. I don't know when. It's difficult to say. The weird thing about this year is it's not pumping as early as it normally does. So obviously before a crash there's normally a pump. So that's kind of weird this year. What does that mean? Does that mean it's going to crash at roughly the normal time but without pumping as much? Does that mean the pump is delayed? The pump will happen but quite late in 2025 and maybe going into 2026 and it'll crash then? Is there going to be no crash this year? Nobody knows. Potentially that can happen. There won't even be a crash. Look at what happened in the post-pandemic years, right? It kind of peaked early, and there was an early crash, but not that much, and then it went on another pump, only slightly higher, all-time high that it reached, and then it did its proper dump. And to be honest, if you look at any chart, even of a meme coin, I like to look at meme coin charts sometimes because you really get this kind of pure chart that you only get in the most volatile of coins. If you look at it live and you see how these coins pump and dump, and there's always a certain pattern to it, and sometimes what happens is the coin will pump prematurely. It will dump too early. And just like we saw with Bitcoin after the pandemic in the last cycle, there'll be a recovery and then it will dump again. Sometimes also what you get is there'll be a dump, but it might not be premature, but it won't be as big as it could be. And then, like I said before, there can be a recovery and then it'll dump properly. So you start to see all these patterns as you watch how prices move and how market participants all come together, and in aggregate there is an effect of the price. So it's super interesting, and it never quite works out according to the classical theory of how pump and dump should look. So this year there's different macroeconomics going on. There's a lot of layoffs, but the unemployment figures technically don't look too bad, although most people think that they've been kind of botched by whoever counts the unemployment figures. For example, long-term unemployed people are not included in unemployment figures, which is just a joke, right? I think everybody can say it's not reflective of reality. We're in a high interest rate environment, whereas in recent years we've had a lot of money printing, quantitative easing. Right now we're in a high interest rate environment to try and get inflation under control, which has been high in recent years. And even now, inflation is kind of ticking up a little bit, but there's not expected to be that many interest rate rises for the rest of the year, maybe one or two, which usually you need that. Not interest rate rise, interest rate lowering. Usually you need free and easy money, lowering of interest rates to get a pump in the market. So yeah, we're not even sure if we're going to get that pump this year. It's kind of weird. Bitcoin is a little bit quite highly correlated in recent years with the stock market. Now the stock market's doing great, but that's only because of AI. The broader market, if you don't include AI, is actually not doing well at all. So it's only because of AI. So does that translate to a Bitcoin pump? Yeah, in a way it does, and in a way it doesn't. It's difficult to tell what's going to happen this year. Nobody really knows, and even last year was a bit of a surprise what happened. I don't think anyone could have predicted what would have happened last year, that it kind of bled and lost a lot of value and then it pumped back up, and as it quite often does, it just sits there in a very narrow range. It just sits there at a whole number, like right now it's, at the time I'm recording this, it's just sitting at 95k. No one really knows what's going to happen. I mean, if you look at a chart, it kind of looks a little bit like 4 years ago when it topped out. You never know when a market's topped out until after, but at the time when it happens, you never really know that you're in a top. The market's very deceiving like that. In a way, the chart looks like we could have topped out, but nobody really feels like that. But at the same time, everyone's kind of quite fearful. The fear and greed index has been in the 30s recently, and I think it's still below 50. No one's feeling super confident about anything with this market. So I think a lot of people fear that it could crash any day, but they also know that it could pump any day. So, yeah, super crazy. Can it crash in 2025? Absolutely it can. But another question, will it crash in 2025? Well, that's anybody's guess. Nobody has got a crystal ball. The only thing I would say is that if you were just starting out with Bitcoin today, then a lot of people would say that anything over 100k is probably not good value. Okay, so in that sense, a lot of people think that whenever the next crash comes, it will likely go under 100k. That the floor is looking like it's going to be under 100k and will probably be something like, I don't know, 60 or 70k, and that it probably won't go lower than that. But I don't know. I also personally believe that. So in a way, for a new investor, you might want to wait for it to crash. But the problem is, not only is it difficult to time the top of the market, it's also difficult to time the bottom of the market. So if you're a new investor and you're like, well, I think it's going to go to 70k and I'm not going to buy until I get that bargain. Well, what if it never goes? What if it goes down and down and down but never hits 70? Let's say it goes down to 90 and then it goes back up again. Well, you've just missed out, right? And it goes up quickly. It goes up to 120. Well, you just missed out because you were so greedy. You wanted to go down to 70 and it never did. So the bottom and the top of the markets are both equally difficult to predict. So yeah, can Bitcoin crash this year? Absolutely it can. Will it? I don't know, and it's very difficult to time. Anyway, hope you liked this video. Give it a thumbs up if you did, and leave a comment below or a question or anything. I would love to get a discussion going, and I will reply to every comment, and I will see you again soon. Take care. Bye bye.